For those of you, I think I know just about everybody, but if not, I'm Bill Reed. I'm with the Veterans Program at the YWCA of Greater Harrisburg. We're heavily involved in York through our SSVF, and we have some transition in place housing in York for veterans. York is our second busiest continuum of care after Dolphin. And that's not surprising because if you look at the impact population and economics wise, York has a greater impact than Dolphin, Cumberland, and Perry County combined. A lot of people miss that. And one thing I would like to say is, Kelly and her team just really seem to be ahead of the curve on a lot of these things. So more than a year ago, this diversion, rapid resolution, it's been called so many things, hit the radar with the VA and especially with our supported service for veterans family SSVF program. SSVF, I'm not sure if you're aware, is it's a VA funded program that kind of circumvents the normal VA medical center hospital octopus that sort of is their system of care in a region. And a big reason why that's done that way is it's able to reach out and do things within the community that would be much more time intensive if they had to go through an entire system of care, all the layers and all the checks. So because of that, we also have the extra challenge, but I would say pleasure of kind of spearheading these initiatives that come from VA and HUD. HUD-VASH is a huge VA program. The Lebanon VA Medical Center, which we're really fortunate to be our medical center, has over 300 HUD-VASH vouchers in their 9-county catchment area. And so there's been this pretty, substantial collaboration between HUD and VA, especially the SSVF program and the VA homeless programs. So shoot forward a few years, 3 years, and someone realizes, I guess we can go to the next slide. I can't make it go to the next slide, can I?
Nope, that's out.
Okay.
I'm trying, hold on. Oh, come on. There we go.
There's these big challenges. So the 3 biggest challenges with housing the homeless, and HUD and SSVF, VA homeless programs, we know that there's a lot of challenges. So just to kind of wake everybody up, we'll call this our calisthenics before we get started on the run, is can anybody share with me one of the big challenges they see out there with facing housing the homeless? Oh, come on, someone out there's got to have an idea. We see them and they're housed immediately. Is that right?
Lack of housing.
Okay, all right. It's almost like I had a ringer in the audience. That's perfect. Housing. What's another big challenge?
You can pay me later.
Okay.
Income.
Income, yeah, sure. Sufficient income, lack of housing, sufficient income. Is there another one out there?
Health.
Health, great. And I think it'd be fair to say if we look at health, we could say just any of those numbers of things in life that happen to someone that maybe make it more difficult to be successful. It could be health, which under that umbrella could be mental health, recovery issues. Oh my gosh, getting older, all these things. So next slide. So, we're all sitting here saying, okay, well, we've got these great community programs, and I really mean this. York has awesome programs. I mean, I know there may be on a particular Thursday or Friday afternoon where you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, not another phone call. I just wish we were more, but I can tell you, I work in 9 different counties, and you guys really are doing a great job. You've got great programs, and there's a lot of collaboration in New York, which I think is great. But there's this one thing that, regardless of what challenge it is, that we can't necessarily fix with hard work and collaboration. And that would be the affordable housing crisis. Next one, Allie. And so if you look at these maps, it's 1980, there was more housing, you know, basically, unless you lived in LA or a few places, you were in pretty good shape. And then, you know, we jump ahead 20 years and basically the coasts are starting to have a problem. But even then, Pennsylvania was in pretty darn good shape, especially South Central Pennsylvania where we live. And now 2014, this is 6 years old. And you can see we're all splotched over. And I can tell you that it's not gotten better. It's gotten worse in the last 6 years. So affordable housing is a huge deal. Next slide. And you know, the folks up at HUD and VA and USICH, all these people who study these things, you know, and track them, what they realize is one of the biggest challenges we face as providers of services is there's just not enough affordable housing, especially for people at 30% or less of the average median income. And how many people, you know, out there in this group have seen people with no income? Well, I can tell you that's kind of pretty normal, right? And very low income, fixed income, Social Security. You know, we typically will get someone comes in and says, well, I make $900 a month. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, let's see. And I have a SNAP card. So that doesn't take long to build a budget or a lack of a budget around those two sources of, you know, support or revenue. And so what they know is that, you know, many of the folks that we work with just, there's not enough affordable housing available. Kelly, do you have a stat right now for York? Anything fairly recent on housing numbers or shortages?
I've been trying to find something, but everything I can find is pre-COVID, and I feel like that makes it just irrelevant at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the moratoriums.
But pre-COVID, there was not enough affordable housing. I think you would agree to that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we were sitting at a pretty high occupancy rate to begin with. It was already in the mid-90s.
Right.
So.
And these agencies, I mean, your agencies, you see the effects of this. Next slide. And so, rapid resolution is a term that the VA came with, and that's because I've been to 5 or 6 conferences funded by the VA to learn how to implement rapid resolution. And the first conference, we were so negative that literally, I don't want to say the environment was toxic, but let's just say the people trying to sell it to us realized that they did not have a friendly audience sitting in front of them. So we were not at all pleased or convinced to hear that we were going to divert people from the services we were being paid to provide them. And being a veteran myself, a disabled veteran, I can tell you, you know, I was one of the guys that stood up in the audience and said, I don't want to tell the veterans that they don't need to connect with me, you know, and then they started to do a better job of explaining what they really meant. And ultimately, what they came up with was rapid resolution. And for HUD, it's housing. Next slide, I guess we'll go. Next slide. I think it's housing. Housing problem solving. I think the version now is kind of leaving, and now it's going to housing problem solving. And so what it really means is this, is that if we can help somebody to avoid entering a homeless system of care where there's not enough houses and it's already overwhelmed, even if it's for a shorter period of time, is it better than just letting them enter the system right now? And so first of all, I'd like to get some input from everybody out there. What's your thoughts? Should we even try to stop someone from entering the system of care for homelessness if they're facing homelessness? What's the thoughts out there in the group? Anybody? I only could see 2 names, so I'm gonna, somebody's got to have a thought on this. Anybody?
I think you should keep, I think you should enter them because just because of the problems that exist with getting them into rapid rehousing them.
Okay. So the thought there is that we really should try and divert them. We should just pull them into the system, pull them into us. Any other thoughts out there?
There's too many delays. If you're not pulling them into the system and you're not accessing every avenue because you can't rapid rehouse them, I think if they're not in this and pulled in, then they could get lost.
Get lost. Okay, that's something I heard a lot over the 5 conferences I went to. Anybody else out there? Everybody in agreement, or anybody feel differently? I mean, the reason we're doing this smaller group is because honestly, if we don't connect the dots at this level, this probably isn't going to work at a system level across the continuum. Any other thoughts out there? Steve, I can see you at the bottom. Unfortunately, you're right there. So you're listening attentively. What's your thoughts, Steve?
I agree with Marcella. I would also probably say it's kind of a both and thing. If we can divert, that'd be great. But you remember when rapid rehousing was first the thing? What was it, 10 years ago, after the 20-year ago, 15-year plan to end homelessness? You know the whole thing, Bill.
Yeah.
I always thought it's kind of a both and thing.
Okay.
Divert if we can, direct resources towards diversion if at all possible. That'd be like ideal. But also, as Marcella is saying, I think we still need emergency housing, sadly.
Right.
Because of mostly because of some of the social determinants that might not be well addressed with a rapid rehousing piece or a diversion piece necessarily.
Okay, good. So let's go on the next slide. This sounds a lot like the first 3 conference. Next slide. That's busy. It's Monday. That's too much for me. Okay, there you go. Okay, so for the first 3 conferences, I absolutely felt that way. We have 2 people serving 9 counties with rapid rehousing. And we typically serve 80 families a year with those 2 people spread out over South Central Pennsylvania. And I would say about 25%, and this is just anecdotal, of those families, whether it's a single person family or a group, re-enter the homeless system because rapid rehousing wasn't enough. But when I talk to my team about the 3 things that are on the screen, rapid resolution, it's designed to immediate, and I can't read the whole slide because of the photos, so I don't know how to display that differently. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this.
Bill, there's a little minus sign on the right. If you tap that minus sign, the bottom pictures will go away and you can see the whole screen then. Or the whole.
There we go. Now I can see it. That's much better, thanks. So when I went over what this rapid resolution or housing problem solving was with my team, I said, it's an intervention to prevent immediate entry or immediately resolve, and it's, if they are in the system, we want them in there as short a time as possible, and that it's system wide. Well, my team looked at me and said, Bill, we're already doing this. Why are we going to all these conferences? Although I like the food, why are we? I was in the Navy 26 years, so staying in a hotel for 2 nights is not a treat for me. Yeah. If I'm going to a conference, sitting in the conference room for 8 hours that day. So, but that aside, and then I stopped and I really thought about this and thought, we really have been doing this all along. We really, when people call us, I think the first thing we naturally do, and anybody who disagrees or this isn't the case, please speak up. We naturally try to solve the problem at the phone call, right? We at that first contact, we naturally try to say, so, I understand this is a problem. You're going to lose this. It's all part of that. Where does rapid resolution housing problem solving start, and where's prevention? Another term we like to throw around. Stop. And and we've really been doing this all along. And when they do get in the system, we use our rapid rehousing programs, and we use that system of care to obviously try and get them into permanent housing as quick as we can. And you know, we have a pretty, I think, Kelly, we have a pretty solid tracking mechanism within our by name list and our coordinated entry to keep an eye on everybody and to make sure they're connected to the system. So we've kind of been doing this all along. Next slide. I step back, and what I really thought about is, are we not doing this, or are we not giving ourselves credit for something that we're going to do anyways? And could we be a little smarter about how we do it? So I knew this was going to happen anyways. I knew it's something we've been doing all along. So I let my mind open up. I tried to leave the baggage of the reality of our world behind and just listen to what the people who do this every day had to say. And one of the things I think that really stuck out in my mind was the fact that if we can connect people, at least my experience is, with family or friends or others, and use them as part of their support team from the beginning, we're oftentimes more successful. They're oftentimes less dependent upon the system. There's the veterans that I have the most success with seem to be the ones that reconnect with family or friends after whatever it was that broke that connection. I mean, I think it's an important part of being part of their, you know, belonging. And if we don't have access to shelters like we don't right now, when we're using hotels or we're using other things, it's really challenging to keep an eye on folks. You know, we have 4 different or 5 different hotels right now that we are funding to serve as shelters for our SSVF program. So we have people in 4 or 5 different hotels. They got a pet, they're a red roofer. They need, you know, they have mobility issues. We got to put them in this hotel because it has an elevator. And so that's a lot of extra work. If they were at a phone or a place where they could call us and we could connect them to other resources, would it be easier? Yeah, honestly, I have to admit it is. And, you know, getting people, I guess this is where I had the hardest time at the biggest aha moment. Trauma-informed care. Do we really want or have to make somebody enter the complete homeless system just to connect them to the continuum of care? And the reality check is if that is a yes, then I think there's a problem with our continuum of care. If someone has to be literally homeless to get connected to the services they need to be successful, then at least my program, maybe we're not thinking broadly enough about the proactive nature of preventing homelessness. And that's just me speaking about our program. Next slide. And so here's the key. The VA funded a bunch of different programs across the country, and they paid them additional funds to hire rapid resolution staff. Now, this is where I think it would be nice if we were $1 million grant and I could hire someone whose only job is to try to divert people. But I don't think any of the programs on this call, I'm just going to scroll down, I'll look at everybody again. Nope, I don't see any programs here that have unlimited funding, let alone office space to stick another person whose only job is to keep people from entering the homeless system. So that meant we needed to learn, first of all, we need to look at how we're having our conversation, and we really need to ask ourselves, are we doing this the right way or the most effective way? And if not, is there a way we could still do all the things we do, not put barriers for people to receive services, but rather be a little more thorough? Thank you, great slide jump there. Be a little more thorough in how we check out whether someone can be successful without being fully pulled into the system. And I mean, I think this slide does a good job of kind of running that over. People face homelessness. They're under trauma. Oftentimes, if this is the first time they're entering homelessness, or they recognize that they're homeless, that they're part of the group, oftentimes the signals they send off can make it appear like things are far worse for them than they really are. And so it's really about having this conversation at the beginning and not just doing a one-page pre-screen and saying, I'll meet you tomorrow at 9 and we're going to enroll you because you've checked box A, B, and C, you're eligible, so we're gonna just enroll you. And this takes a conscious effort for us to do this. This wasn't something easy for us to do. And the real goal is that we want them to be safe. We want them to stay housed as long as possible. And here's the real key, and I think, Kelly, you brought this up. Success may not look, like something providers are used to. So if we can keep somebody from entering homelessness for 6 months, is that not a success to them? Like not having to go into a shelter or not having to go through a full assessment and discuss every aspect of their life and do all these things. Is that, 6 more months of feeling like I can make this work myself with a little bit of help? That could be success to some people. And, the bottom line, the big plus there is, and that's 6 months we can use that housing unit for someone who's in far greater need of it. And so, in some ways I'm not happy that it's a bit of a screening tool, but in other ways, when I sat down and thought about it, I thought, we're really doing it anyways. Maybe we just need to be a little more thorough on how we're asking those questions up front. So I guess next slide. Okay, so here's the official goals. We want everybody to be safe. It's the individual's choice. And where possible, housing has the potential to be a longer term. We want to do that. And when not long term, options that de-escalate the crisis. So this is a lot. I'm not going to, there was a lot of eye rolling when I told my team, hey, on top of all the other things you're doing, you got to make sure we're ticking this list. But, the more we talked about, the more we realized this is what we should be doing all along anyways, right?
Okay,
And,
I don't know what happened, guys. I'm really sorry.
hello?
It's Laura.
Oh, Laura, we're already doing, we're fine.
I'm
Okay.
so sorry. So
Okay.
sorry. I was on another link for some reason.
Okay, Laura, so we're on slide something or other, moving along. So
Okay, everybody, I apologize.
So everyone, Laura is also SSVF. She's with Volunteers of America, and she went to all these conferences that I went to. And so, Laura, a quick recap. We've talked about rapid resolution, some of the same thoughts that we experienced about wanting to pull people into the system of care is the preferred method, currently the preferred method. And we talked about some of the main challenges to actually getting someone into permanent housing. And what we're doing now is just talking about the perspective that, rapid resolution isn't necessarily something we haven't been doing all along. It's just maybe we haven't been as defined in how we do it.
Okay.
And we're right now just looking over the official purposes of why. And so I've been talking now for like 5 minutes straight. What's everybody out there? What are your thoughts on those 4 purposes? I mean, I really want to hear some feedback from the leadership in York. What's your thoughts on those purpose, the purpose of this? Anybody? Marcella, help me out. I know you're thinking something. What do you think?
Well, you're definitely right. We have to look. We look at safety. We look at and there's always, the clients they have choices, but in your county, housing is so scarce, and the pickings are sometimes, a lot of people feel like they're picking beneath their standards to choose housing just to be in housing. So,
Right.
And yeah, it should be the potential to be a longer term housing. They should have that sense of well-being to know that they can maintain it.
Yeah, and you know, I guess what really bothered me, confession, is when this first started, I felt like I was being told that there aren't enough cars for sale, and your job is to make sure that 25% of the people that need a car don't get one, or don't get to look for one today. And there was something about that that bothered me, right?
Right.
Because that was how it was first sold. There's a 25% shortage nationwide in enough resources in HUD to serve all the people that are going to need it. And we want you to reduce the number who are asking. And I didn't like that.
Well,
I'll agree with Bill. I using the car analogy, I felt like, yes, they're saying not everybody's going to get a car. So find them one that's beat up, that's used, that may not work for that particular veteran, and sweet talk them into that. Kind of how I felt as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key here is number one and two. To me, we all do number one. I mean, we're all looking at safety. I mean, safety's first. I don't know a single case manager when someone calls, their heart doesn't get tugged a little bit, and then I'll think, is this person safe? You know, are they in a car right now with 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the person you're going to divert, likely, but you could, and we've had it happen. We've literally made phone calls and had someone say, yeah, you can stay with your sister for a month while we connect you to some resources, and you can start looking for an apartment with some help, but maybe we don't need to put you in a shelter today, right? But the big thing is the second one, and that is it's the client's choice. It's that person's choice. So if someone is just absolutely needs those services and we need to pull them in, I mean, does anybody out there have too many case managers?
Yeah.
And anybody out there have case managers that are complaining because they're sitting around all day and they got not a darn thing to do? No. And so any chance we have of keeping that caseload in control is great. And honestly, my biggest fear with COVID now in the money is what we're going to be doing is we're going to be throwing a lot of money at case management, and then the faucet's going to get turned off abruptly. And my biggest fear is with the pure volume we're dealing with, is there enough resources to not just house them, but is there enough resources to work out all those other issues? Or are we warehousing people now because of COVID? And 6 months to a year from now, we're going to deal with this in a big way, right?
I think another component of this that we are keenly aware of, you know, probably our emergency shelter folks, I see them across my screen, is the lack of space. Even me, like as I'm getting phone calls and people are asking for space, I'm starting to have conversations about, is there somewhere else you can go? Because where once upon a time, you know, we would have done everything we could to house as many people as humanly possible. I've seen the wild things that Marcella has done with her space to make sure that she can take people in. And that's not an option. So even though it feels like there's a lot of money right now because, oh, we're going to house people because then we're going to keep them safe from COVID. If you don't have housing and you don't have emergency shelter, what are we going to do with them? So even when people are calling me, I'm like, I really encourage you to start thinking about, is there someone you can stay with? Because your likelihood of getting into emergency shelter in York County right now is low. It's going to take a long time. So we're going to need to find another plan until we can find you a space.
Yeah, and Kelly, I think, you know, when I think about that over a 6-month timeline, you know, my big concern here is that because and I can only speak for our program, we're way over 100% of our norm for the year, and we haven't even hit the winter. And we were given extra funding to hire a healthcare navigator. Okay, thanks. That's awesome. I get the idea. But, the bottom line is there's only so many case managers per family. So I think this is where it really shows that it's not just about having enough money. We could have all the money in the world, but if there isn't enough housing and case managers to work with the people we're being told we have to deal with right now, then some are going to slip through the crack when it's over, and we're going to have to start the process again. And then I'm afraid we'll have done a really good job of eating up all of the affordable housing that's out there, and it's going to be tough. So, my thoughts are that the more people we can keep connected to their, I call it their personal system of care, their friends, their family, the, community resources to help them learn how to balance their budget or, get them a job, those kinds of things. The more we can connect people to those without entering into that system,
Hey,
I
Bill.
just feel like the better off we could be. Yeah.
Hey, Bill. Yeah, just along with that, I love this idea, as you talk about connecting those with stuff they need before they become homeless. Here's a question. How have you, is there a mechanism or a procedure or a process that you guys have uncovered or developed to identify the near homeless, those that are in a precarious position before you can connect them? Have you given thought about how to identify people who are near homeless, I guess?
Absolutely. That's a really great question, Steve. The one thing that SSVF is charged with, aside from rapid rehousing, is also homelessness prevention. And this is where, additionally, we can kind of look and find those individuals who really are kind of teetering on immediate homelessness. Those are the people who say, I have a lockout date for next Tuesday. Sometimes we always get the call, I have a lockout date for tomorrow. They're coming at 7 a.m.
We get the call Friday for a Monday lockout. Yeah, that's
Right.
awesome.
Exactly.
And
And it's on the voicemail.
And locally, we see that too. Marcella gets calls from people looking for shelter space at her place just before they lose their housing.
Right.
Next door gets lots of calls, not only because they're going to lose their housing, they're looking for homeless prevention. Typically, our homeless prevention pot is much smaller, so it gives you an opportunity to connect with them at that
Right. The other thing is, and we'll get to this a lot as we go along. The other thing, Steve, is that we find through this process of rapid resolution HPS, because it focuses, and really the first task of this is what they consider an in-depth conversation to get this information. Even people who are coming in to shelter, we may be able to, okay, it's not the traditional diversion from shelter, it may be rapid exit from shelter. So we're talking to them, when they hit the door the next day, depending on timing, and we're extrapolating the information where we might be able to identify a possible HPS rapid resolution. And from there, we're following and, marching on that path really fast to see if we can exit them almost immediately out of shelter. So their experience in that shelter or literal homelessness is as brief as possible.
And Steve, what I would say to add to Laura's, insight on this is that I think because of COVID and the ability to use funding for prevention, the days of continuums of care being focused purely on homeless individuals are over. I find in America that once something is given as a benefit, if it's given for any length of time, it quickly becomes an entitlement. And while I'm not sure that the level of funding is going to continue to exist because we're all going to be doing so much more prevention in the next 18 months, I feel like our systems of care are going to have to evolve. And once they evolve, really, why would we want to step backwards? That doesn't mean we could necessarily fund somebody who isn't literally homeless. But if we develop this intervention now in this way of dealing with people where they are, then we've, sadly, good things could come out of bad things. And in a way, this crisis is going to force us to look at prevention, not as, by the way, other thing, but really as the proactive part of our homeless system of care. And that's where I feel like we have this precious 18 months as leaders within our community to provide services to come up with this system of care, right? And that comes from that rapid initial contact where we try to keep people from entering the system, to connecting them to resources that may not necessarily be housing, but could buttress up the weaknesses in their stability and give them that opportunity to not ever really enter the literal homeless process. And so I really think this is going to be an evolutionary process for all of our continuums, where it's going to be very difficult after 18 months to call somebody who says, well, I'm actually living here, I'm facing eviction in 21 days, and say, sorry, I can't help you. You know, that's over. That's, you know, so I think the sooner we could come up with this process to divert, or that to come up with these solutions, and I like the HPS, I just need to get used to the acronym.
I like it too.
Come up with these solutions, I feel like, you know, the better off we'll be. I'm sorry it's a long, multiple answer to a question, Steve, but I think you really hit on the subject there. How about next slide?
And I think really quickly before you move on, Bill, you can move the slide, that's fine. But I think that, you know, it's easy to feel like, well, there's no way, you know, the people that are calling in to look for assistance, there's no way this is the right model. And for a lot of them, it might not be. But when I think about how many people enter our shelter system, and then within a couple of days, they've disappeared because they've gone to stay with someone. Well, could we have prevented them entering the shelter for 2 or 3 days to begin with? Could we have just facilitated them going to stay with someone? Because clearly, they either were not comfortable in the shelter space, they had located someone that could help them. Could we skip those few days and then not knowing where someone is? I see it primarily through the coordinated entry system, where I make a referral, I notify the shelter so that the staff there are aware this person's got a referral, and the response back that I get is, well, they left yesterday. And I'm like, they weren't even there a week. So I feel like there are people that are entering the shelter system that would benefit from this. I don't for a second think it's everybody. I just think that there is a population that would really have an impact on how our shelters are able to provide service. Lost time trying to figure out if someone has disappeared to stay with someone or is coming back. Those types of things I think would be advantageous.
So Marcella, let me ask you a quick question. About how many in a year, about how many families do you shelter?
In a year,
Mm-hmm.
550 to 625, anywhere around there, families.
So if anybody has a calculator, well, I'm going to go low because I know what the average rapid resolution was doing pre-COVID. So what's 15% of 550?
Actually, I'm sorry, those were individuals.
Okay.
Actual families is near 300.
Okay, so what's 15% of 300 is what, 45, right? So would it not be great to have 45 less? Oh, wait, 100, what am I saying?
It's about 255 total.
Oh my gosh, I'm drinking more coffee because that obviously,
Wait. It was
That's
45.
only if I did the math right.
No,
15% of 300 is 45.
Right, 45, right. So would it not be great to have 45 less families that need that shelter space a year?
Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you right now that the test projects that have been doing this are averaging around 15 to 20% success rate.
Mm-hmm.
So
We're still looking at several hundred, like anywhere from 75 to 125 calls a month of people who want services that we're not serving.
And it's similar to us. I would say for every person we enroll, there's probably 2.5 to 3 that call in that we are already doing this with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really the point, is if they counted it as a straight rapid resolution and as this process, that alone is a significant number. If you count the number of people you're actually doing this with already, just think if you had to house all of them, right? And so I think, really, in a lot of ways, I came to really accept this when I realized we weren't being asked to do anything that we hadn't done already. We were just being asked to put it into the system of care in a more formal way so we could become better at it and we could coordinate it so that when people weren't actually enrolled or were quickly moved from little homelessness, we had a system in place to make sure that all the other things were connected, and we used, to the best of our ability, their existing resources. And,
Right.
and this slide really hits home what they really mean by this HPS. It's not something we have been doing. I think what they really want is to make sure that across the continuum, we're all kind of doing it in a similar way. And I'm sure, Marcel, if you read these 5 bullets, this is probably what you do every day, right?
Yeah, I was actually looking at them and wondering, how does this compare to what we're doing with the VI-SPDAT process? The VI-SPDAT process kind of tallies people a score and serves them accordingly. But now we're saying, listen, validate their experience, being non-judgmental, house everyone.
Well,
it's
yes
how
and
you
no.
view that. So first of all, wait, hang on 1 second, Laura.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to make it really clear that honestly, housing problem solving and rapid resolution conversations should happen long before you're looking at doing a coordinated entry assessment.
Okay.
You should only be doing coordinated entry assessments on those that don't have another viable option. So it is not a scored process when you're talking about rapid resolution and housing problem solving. It's more conversational to see if you can avoid a situation where they need to have a VI-SPDAT and they're obviously entering like a literally homeless situation, which would make them eligible for rapid rehousing.
Right. What I was going to add, Marcella, because Kelly has a great point. I initially kept, and I think a lot of us did when this was first presented, we do this every day. We do this every day. We do this with every client. And we do, to a limited extent. The idea of rapid resolution, or HPS, is taking it that one step further in the conversation. Really, you know, they said, well, I have family in the area. Who are they using as an emergency contact? Explore that idea with them. Well, is there any way you could stay with that person? Well, no, I don't think so. Okay, what would be getting in the way of that? Because maybe we can find that as an option to, at least at this point, save you from being on the street. And then the conversation starts. And I have found that it's literally from the jump. That's the first conversation you have. And then you move forward with everything else, should you not be able to find an HPS.
Right.
And the other thing that kind of created a lot of hesitation for me was, this is putting in a lot of time, not a ton of time, but it's putting in more time than you usually do in that first interaction. Yes, it's putting the time in up front, but think of how much time you're saving on the back end. And, you know, they kept saying that, and I kept going, until we put it into practice. And now I'm like,
It works.
You're putting a title and an emphasis to something that I think anybody who's running a homeless shelter does already. So with every phone intake is helping them to process. 9 times out of 10, we're helping folks process what's your situation, what can you do, what other resources can you find to help you right now, because
absolutely,
9 times out of 10, there's no space.
Absolutely. And
so all that
we all felt the same way, because we're seeing people at shelters and we're getting the calls as well. And even our coordinated entry calls, this is the first way we interact with them. And yes,
right, it is.
Everybody is definitely doing this. Any provider worth their salt is doing this.
Right.
It's putting in a little bit more time in what we're already doing. So if they say, well, you know, I thought about staying with my aunt, but I'm not sure that's really going to work. It's going into that conversation of, well, how could I help you maybe make that work. Do you need me to help you call? Yeah, it's
I've
putting
done that.
forth. Oh, I'm sure, Marcella, I guarantee you have. Absolutely. But it's getting everybody to kind of buy into that upfront time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think so, Bill. I think that's a big part of it, putting in that upfront time.
Yeah, let's pull up the next slide because I think this is a good time to go into this. So we all know the reasons for homelessness, right? So before we go into this, so this is, to me, this is a telling slide. So are these a reason for homelessness? Lack of affordable housing? Is that a reason? Would everybody agree?
Yeah.
Just check. How about unemployment? We agree?
Yes.
Poverty?
Yes.
Mental illness? Substance abuse?
Oh, yeah.
And anybody out there on the call know anybody that has one or more of these that isn't homeless? Anybody? I do. I know a lot of people that have these. Right? I have friends
The
who.
only other one I would add to that I'm seeing more and more of is family disruption.
Yep, sure. So I think the point with that slide is this: is that sometimes when we develop these processes that are supposed to rapidly pull people into a homeless system of care, I'm just speaking for me. I can get into this rut where I say, okay, and now the next fire I'm going to put out, and you're the next fire, and okay, you're an eligible veteran, you make less than 50% of the average median income, and you're literally homeless, or you're about to be. Sure, I'll enroll you. What it's really saying is that there's lots of people with those problems that with just a little bit of intervention, they don't have to become homeless or stay homeless very long. They don't have to become full-blown 3-month, 6-month clients. They can be someone we can deal with quickly. And I think the real key here is it's something we've been doing all along, that maybe we just need to take a little bit more formal approach in how we do it and what we do, and make sure it's part of our continuum of care. Make sure it's part of our continuum of service, and that it's built into the system so that when someone is at that point, we can connect to them right away instead of waiting till they're literally homeless. So next slide. But anybody's thoughts out there on that? I mean, does anybody see an advantage to this? Now, I think the principles are there. I'll let you read them. But I mean, what's the thoughts? Everybody's pretty quiet out there. I'm hoping it's not skepticism. Maybe it is. I don't know. Rob and Jim, you've both been pretty quiet, and you made the mistake of leaving your video on, so I can see you both have lots of books and are scholarly. So
that's just a prop.
It's a good one though. I like it.
Good. I think it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. I think a lot of times, I liked how you just had that last slide on there, because you're right. A lot of us know people that could fall in all of those categories that aren't, homeless. It's the taking the time up front. But to me, because I'm thinking long term, it's also then, yes, let's do this, but then let's also work on some housing issues as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's just another piece of that puzzle, but it does make sense. But again, like I think you're saying, I mean, it's got to really be a buy-in by the whole continuum, because if not everybody's doing this, it's not going to flow.
Right. Yeah, and I really believe that. Jim, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I look at it and agree with Robin and what you were saying, Bill, and the slides here. I look at it from a little different perspective, because I've always looked at how do we address and think about the larger issues that are coming in, and putting all of you in the position that you're in now with this kind of situation. As Robin was saying, what's the bigger picture? What's the long-term solution? How do we talk to the developers? How do we talk to some other people and look at how we address these situations of housing and affordable housing and some of the other issues? How do we look at the healthcare system and address some of those issues with the health issues and things like that? Obviously, a much larger conversation that is not an easy one. And when I see what you are dealing with here, you kind of get put in this situation where you have to look at the immediate thing, and it makes it difficult to sometimes try and work on that larger picture because the immediate is so pressing and so hard. So it just, for me, it just highlights how much we really have to do yet.
Thanks. And Tim, you know, one of the things that really struck me when they really wanted an SSVF program in this region, the SSVF program for the nation and a senior HUD person came to the Lebanon VA Medical Center, and they briefed us on what rapid rehousing and SSVF was. And the HUD person said something that was like a slap in the face. Well, this addresses homelessness, not poverty. I want you to understand, this is a housing program, not a poverty program. And this came out of someone, very senior person, by the way, in HUD. And I appreciated the honesty of it because, you know, the truth is, SSVF is so much more than rapid rehousing. We case manage, we connect the services, develop linkages, we do all these other things. But it's so easy with the pure volume of services we have for it to become kind of a rote, house them next, house them next, house them next. And I really see this not as a way necessarily to solve the bigger problems, but do a better job at capturing how many people really have those problems. Mm-hmm. Because how many times do we do a pre-screen and it goes in a folder, and since they weren't enrolled, they're not in HMIS, we don't really track them. We don't really know, you know, I mean, I think Marcelo, you said hundreds, you said, request, and I'm sure the continuum tracks those initial, you know, we got this many requests for services. I'm sure Kelly's got all that right there now. She could give us an absolute figure, but I won't put her on the spot. But the truth is, I think the more we have this dialogue and the more we are involved, I feel like the more we're bringing to the surface the real causes. And even though not everybody that has those problems is going to be homeless, I think it does kind of give us a feel as a community of what it takes for somebody to get on the phone and say, I'm going to be homeless and I need your help. I mean, I just think about making that phone call myself every day and what it takes, the trauma it puts a person through to make that call. And so, yeah, I think maybe we can use this as a way also to, you know, get a little bit of handle on what's going on. So what are your thoughts on that? Anybody? Kelly, what are you thinking?
I think so. I know Marcella keeps excellent data on how many people call in, what they're looking for, what their situation is currently. She's done that longer than I've done my job, I think. She's always done that. But I don't know that there's any continuity for that across other emergency shelters in our community. I know that, you know, Nextdoor does keep some basic information, but we're not tracking any of that in any kind of way that is, you know, systemic, making sure that we're capturing all of that. We've talked about it for years, but it does require additional, you know, data entry. And so it's never really taken off. And, you know, there's a lot of conversations around housing problem solving and rapid resolution and tracking it. And I do think that it does help to track it. But my primary focus is having the conversation. We can talk about tracking it after, but I want to make sure that everyone's on board and has the tools that they need to have a successful conversation, right, before we worry about it.
Well, that's good. Well, that's a good redirection segue, Kelly. I got you. Let's look at the principles of rapid resolution. I'm with you. You're an army of two, right? so
An army of two who are, trying to figure out lots of COVID things on top of everything else.
Oh yeah. And oh, by the way, all of this discussion is under the umbrella that we're in the middle of a pandemic that's still ongoing. So next slide. So none of this is a surprise. So housing first, crisis response, client choice, progressive assistance, community resources. And so, since this is the leadership group, to me, this slide really says, if we're already doing this, let's call it what it is. And there's some great training. That's one of the things we're getting close to the end, I think. The goal is to do follow-on training with the providers who maybe aren't as comfortable as the experts that are on this call with doing some of these things, right? Asking someone if they can stay somewhere, it may not be easy for every case manager, right? Everybody who answers the phone. But these are the basic core principles. And I think these are the things that we've through the years, we've kind of realized this is what we do anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide. Next slide. Does anybody not know what housing first means?
Oh, but hang on. There's probably a really key component here to draw out. We've talked about it before, but I think it's worth reminding. We all think of housing first exactly the way Marcella talked about it early in the call, where she said, bring them into the system so that they are eligible for help in getting a unit of their own. And she's not wrong at all. But you can also think about housing first as you're getting them into housing. It doesn't mean you're getting them in a position where they're eligible for rental assistance. It doesn't mean that you're getting them a position where they're eligible for permanent supportive housing. It means you are housing them first.
No, that's a very purist way to look at it, but I think it's accurate.
Yes.
I mean, there's lots of people who, well, I had grown children during college, for example, that lived with me for a few months. They weren't homeless. They just they still had to live under Bill's rules, So there is a better option. They wanted that option. It motivated them to finish their college so that they could have their own rules. But bottom line is, you're right, they still were housed. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
And being literally homeless is never a good deal for anybody in any way. That's never a good way to get services. You end up there, but that's not. Okay. And the thing here, this is more into, I think, a follow on how we were shown, and I think how this housing HPS and RR work is that there's a normal flow that they have found that seems to work to divert or quickly move somebody from a homeless situation. And I think these are some of the keys we found doing this. And Laura, you could probably add, one of the things when we're on the call, and Laura, I'm sure you could share a story, I'll let you jump in, about convincing someone that while they feel they need their own apartment, that's not necessarily what's in their best interest right now. I mean, Laura, could you share an example of where that's happened?
Absolutely. In fact, one of our very recent clients, we talked about this. It is a veteran who has experienced homelessness before. She was actually in our rapid rehousing program before. And what we ended up doing in that first conversation with her is finding out a couple of things. She is just starting a methadone program. Her father lives near that methadone program, and he works later in the day. So we talked about, would it be possible for your father to let you stay with him, even if temporarily, so that we can look at some of those other housing barriers and start to mitigate those, such as needing to be close to the methadone clinic and being able to get back and forth at ungodly hours of the morning. And those were going to be two big housing barriers for her, because we were going to have to find something very nearby, which really limited our search. So that was a case where we were then able to have a discussion with the client and her father and kind of help negotiate how that cohabitation was going to work, because he had concerns, she had concerns. And in many cases, the individual who is experiencing homelessness doesn't know how to interact with the other party to express what their concerns are going to be without it becoming volatile, potentially. So that was a case where we could kind of mediate that conversation and take away for a moment all of those other kind of past interactions that may come up. So the father could say to us, you know, in the past XYZ, rather than turning to the daughter and saying, well, you know, you used to do this. How can I, you know, expect that not to happen again? The way it's being said to us is less accusatory, less emotionally charged. So it puts the daughter a little bit at ease because she's not hearing it the same way she's always heard it. And we're able to say, okay, you know, those are valid concerns. What do you think your reply would be if I brought those concerns to you? Like, give me the answers. So she's responding to us. Well, she's not going to scream and yell at us. Well, let's face it, sometimes that happens, but it's less likely to happen. So she's responding to us, and then we can turn to the dad and say, okay, well, what do you think about that? And it often, for us, results in creating a contract. You write down what both parties' expectations are once they agree upon them, and you have them sign it. And then if something starts to disrupt, they can come back to us and say, hey, we're having a problem with this. This isn't happening. We're also still engaging with that person, checking in. Hey, how are things going? Let's look at, you know, do you think this is going to be longer term? How much longer could you stay there? What else do we need to be doing? Because it's not a case of we get you to stay with somebody and we drop you. We don't care what happens. Because we know this may not be long term, but it kept her out of shelter.
And Laura, if I could interject, this is a big key difference between doing a thorough screening and trying to redirect somebody from the system and actually doing RRHPS is we're not simply at that first phone call. Now, I'm not saying what it would be for every agency, but for example, for SSVF, we track them for 90 days. Mm-hmm. And so they can call us and get this light assistance. They used to call it light touch. Sometimes right. it's anything but light some days. How about it, Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. Some days it's intense.
But the difference is it's a lot less intensive than pulling someone in, taking care of all their needs, searching for an apartment, negotiating with a landlord, pulling together the funding to get them into the apartment. And oh, by the way, all that other stuff that we're doing for those nights, that's still in the mix too, right? And
right.
So I think that's one of the things that's really clear is that it's not like we're just saying, okay, you're going to stay with your third cousin for 2 more weeks. Yeah, call me in 2 weeks if it doesn't work out. That isn't what this is. It is about making
right.
sure that housing first is happening. And it's involved sometimes. So
absolutely.
How about next slide? Okay, then you just talked. There you go, Laura. We're just going to call that Laura's slide, crisis resolution. So this is you gave a perfect example, I think, of where this person could have really relapsed or ended up having real problems. Mm-hmm. And, you know, sadly, we lost a vet that had exited one of our programs 3 weeks later to suicide. And so, you know, not everybody thrives sitting alone in an apartment we put them into by themselves, you know, in being connected to that family or that community has real value. The key is sometimes recreating that as a support network and not the reason they want to become homeless in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think we see a lot of that in our business. So how about the next slide? Okay. And I don't know, I'm going to let you go over this one, Laura. You
Okay. Well, we've talked about the fact a couple of times we've mentioned, and you guys have mentioned the fact that at that immediate point of contact, that very first from the jump conversation, this is where the response begins. And this is a little bit misleading. It's not, it occurs, boom, it's done. It occurs and continues to occur throughout your work with the individual. always, just like you guys for everything we're doing, it's focusing on let's de-escalate this particular crisis. But here's the switch, even if it's temporary. That's the big switch. And none of us, I know in SSVF, that was never our thought process. We were to get them into permanent housing, permanent. And that is the ultimate goal. The immediate goal now is let's try to keep people out of this crisis of literal homelessness as much as we can and as quickly as we can if they've already entered that. Really, what's needed here on our end is one of the big skills is we need to be able to quickly start picking up on those comments, on the body language, on what's not being said, to really kind of figure out what are those immediate needs. What does that safe place look like for this individual? Because it may be different for every person. You may have somebody with substance abuse disorder, and they're coming to you and you ask, is there anywhere you might be able to stay? Well, they tell you the first person that comes to mind. And as you're talking to them, you find out that first person, they're actively using. This person is just fresh into recovery. Not a safe place. Not at all. So, because what is that doing? That's setting them up for re-entering the crisis situation immediately. That's going to disrupt within 2 days. That doesn't help us.
Yeah, and I guess with everybody on the call, I don't think, I mean, a lot of these seem like our best practices we're doing already.
Absolutely.
I guess to me, the big difference I saw and is that there's this commitment to not make the problem go away, but to be part of the solution, but not such part of the solution that we need to provide the full array of housing services that we all know we don't have enough of. And I think that is where this comes back around. The underlying thing here is I think everybody's agency on this call certainly does these kinds of things, but I wonder if our case managers understand the benefit, and they probably do, of having a more formal process where maybe we could do lighter services and still solve the problem, but not necessarily fully increase the caseload by one. And I'm sure every agency has a different need based on that. So it's not like that you can broad brush this. So
exactly. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, go ahead, Laura.
What I was simply going to say is it's not like you're abandoning that mandate to find permanent housing for individuals. We have enough who aren't going to fall into a rapid resolution HPS availability. So trust me, you're not going to go back to your funders and say, well, we're really not doing that anymore. Oh, you're doing it. You're doing it. And in some cases, like the case I was discussing, that particular rapid resolution has become a permanent resolution for this client. So you may still be doing permanent housing just through the path of HPS rapid resolution.
Okay, how about next slide? Okay. There's no such thing as an assertive client that's going to tell you what they need. So this is a new thought here. Next slide. Okay. I guess the point here is that what they're really trying to say is that at no point will we tell somebody who comes in for services that's eligible that they cannot have those services. The real point with this is that we just want to have that conversation to kind of deal with that stress that is pushed into making this phone call or showing up at the shelter or the emergency room and say, listen, let's talk about what resources you really have and what makes the most sense for you. And more than 75% of the time, they probably are going to enter the system of care as homeless. But if 15 to 20% of them are able to resolve without doing that, so much better for them, right? And because we've stopped and listened and haven't just put them into a box and moved them down the line, I think we've also established that sense of trust with them. And then if they do get in more problems down the road, they know they can call us and we're going to actually listen and be compassionate and care about what their choice is. But so I think that's really where client choice comes in with this dialogue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to just jump to one thing. It's off topic, but it's in my head now. One of the benefits for SSVF programs, and I don't know how this would work for every other organization, grant, so be it. We are still entering these particular clients into our data system. They still are considered our clients. So that also, you know, I don't know if there are concerns of, if we keep putting this into practice, we're limiting the numbers that we can count, because we all know grants are led by numbers. Counties are led by number. Every bit of funding is led by some sort of number. So if that is a concern, I understand. What I would do is go back to your funder or whatever you have to answer to in the long run with your numbers, and explain what you're doing, that they're still being served by you. I keep turning that off. They're still being served by you, but it's in a different way, and see if that can still count towards your numbers. They may not come in to your physical space, but you still assisted them. That might be something that may drive how invested you are in it. So I understand that, and I can pretty much guarantee that Bill does too, and as does Kelly. We do understand that this would, because it's changing an approach, this could potentially affect all those things. Sorry to have jumped off topic, but like I said, it was in my head.
I mean, we're aware of that too. And I think that it is, so while rapid resolution with the SSVF programs has been around for some time, the HUD terminology, housing problem solving, is really new for them. And so having this conversation right now, like no one is having this conversation right now because they're trying to focus on 1,000 things like we all are. But I think it's a relevant conversation, and that's why we're having it. So I think there are opportunities, if there is a sense within our homeless system that this is something to pursue. I think there are opportunities to look at additional resources to support something like this.
Absolutely.
And the other piece, also off topic, sorry, Bill, Laura and I, it's like herding cats. But the other piece I wanted to kind of throw out there, just so everyone is aware that this isn't really supposed to just be a homeless system responsibility. The intention behind housing problem solving is for this to be far beyond just housing providers who have people knocking on their door and calling their phones because they don't have anywhere to go. The intention here is that your mental health providers, your substance use providers, your health systems are all doing similar conversations, so that you aren't the only line having these conversations, that they're happening elsewhere. In our community, we had discussions and kind of made a decision to have this conversation with our housing front lines first, because you guys, your ability to assist in this way is kind of a foundation for asking additional levels of community service if they're interested as well. But there is an intention, and if it's something we can do as a system, there's certainly, my intention is to spread that out far beyond just our front door housing providers.
Right, right. Okay, let's look at that next slide. Okay, progressive assistance. And again, I think this goes back to what you were just saying, Kelly, is that, you know, if we think about all the different things we do, one of the biggest things we provide to the people we serve, regardless of what our program is our understanding of how services can be obtained and trying to get them the level of assistance they need to take care of the problem. And, you know, and I don't really like the just enough assistance, just in time as long as needed. I honestly feel that, while I know that part of the underlying reasoning behind this is because there's not enough housing and there's not enough resources. I think that what we really want to do is try and put people on the right track to be successful. And that means different things to everybody we deal with based on their barriers. And I can tell you that when we do RR, we don't, it's not like we have this measuring cup and we start filling it up and we say, okay, is a quarter cup just enough that's going to make you go away? Is a half cup enough that's going to keep you from being homeless today? We don't do that, right? And
exactly. I think part of it, Bill, why it was worded that way for us was talking about when we are able to provide some funding and financial assistance. I think that's probably what it's referring to the most. But when it comes to the actual case management, it's not the just enough.
Yeah, and let's face it, there's some folks you could have unlimited resources and they would continue to have problems throughout their life, right? And then there's others you can give them, Hershey bar and directions to the office to get a SNAP card and you'll never see them again. And so, I think the real point here is just making sure that we're able to not say, okay, so you're having a problem, so we're going to bring you in, you're going to stay here for 30 days, we're going to do this, we're going to move you to another house, we're going to make you pick an apartment, we're going to put you in that apartment because by golly, we're housing first and we're not going to be happy till everybody's sitting in an apartment in York. Even if you have no desire to ever rent anything, right?
Right.
Because there's people who don't want to rent an apartment. And so that's the thing here is the idea is to just make sure that the right amount of support is always available and as soon as possible to meet the needs. And then as the needs increase, so does the level of assistance that's needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, next slide. Okay, and I think you just hit on this really well, Kelly, and a big part of this is to try and grow the level of support and communication, not just within this key group of leadership within housing, within the community, but with all the providers that significantly impact the contributors to housing instability. And so I see York as one of those places where I literally can make one phone call pretty much to anybody on this call or that first line in these organizations, and I know I'll get a call right back and I know I'll get help. And so I feel like there's this really strong bond already in York. And, a big part of this is just making sure that even people who aren't literally homeless receive that level of coordination for community resources. And that means we're going to have to bring some people in to the circle that aren't necessarily dedicated just to addressing the housing piece, but are connected to all those resources. And a lot of you already do this, but this is, what they're trying to emphasize. Any thoughts on that out there? Any thoughts about how rapid resolution could be coordinated? Kelly, your thoughts within your continuum?
You mean outside of housing? I think it'll end up being not a coordinated entry process, but something similar, some kind of initial group that will understand the sharing of resources. It'll probably have ongoing trainings and education on resources for all of those having the conversations, so that even if you do have staff turnover or someone's been out and they're kind of wondering what's changed, we'll be able to do those things more often, more frequently, to share those resources. The probably advantage that a lot of the folks in this call have seen through COVID is while we all worked together before, we work together really closely now. And we pulled in a lot of people that maybe we didn't have quite the same connection with that we do now. And so I think there's a natural progression there of having this conversation like, hey, we worked so well together during COVID on this. What do you think about this housing problem solving thing? What do you think about having some conversations before you just automatically ship someone off with the phone number for Life Path or the phone number for Bell Family Shelter? What if you have a conversation with them first, and if you can like resolve it, then you don't have to worry about whether or not they got in touch with Bell and got their name on the wait list, and whether or not they're calling every day to make sure they get space.
Right.
So I think there's an opportunity there to grow those already existing relationships.
So Kelly, just now I'm going to go a little off script here. So I love the Friday Zoom call. Like, that's incredibly impressive.
He's referring to the York County Rental Assistance Provider phone call. Every 2 weeks on Friday, we get all of the rental assistance providers together to talk about where their funding's at, how it's working, problems they're seeing, the whole gamut.
I will tell you that you guys are leaders in the region for that. That is like
Absolutely.
really a big deal. And so, I could see a forum like that meeting. Maybe it's not where you necessarily do direct tracking within the HMIS system, but I could see where there would be a real advantage, like at least a monthly call, to just talk to the key providers and say, so what are you seeing out there, and give us a heads up. So if there is a wave coming to hit us, we could kind of get prepared for it, right?
Right.
Or if we're seeing a certain shift in something happening. And I think having the key leadership team, York's key leadership team for homelessness is critical. And I think I would just be surprised if, with COVID and the experiences we've gone through, if people wouldn't want to continue to do that kind of collaboration. I feel like that's really a huge step forward. One of the benefits,
I think it helped us all understand that we're all really dealing with the same challenges. We just weren't talking about them before.
Yep.
So yeah, it's really helpful.
And again, you can see community resources. The slide just pretty much lays it out right there. And so the more we can develop ways to build those formal linkages or informal linkages, I just think the more effective we are. And I don't want to say the easier our job gets, but the better we are at quickly meeting the needs of those who need services without feeling like everybody needs a full turkey dinner. Maybe they just want a sandwich and they're fine. And a lot of times that's really all they want, right? They really don't want to change their whole life. They just want that problem to go away now. So, okay, next slide. Okay, so again, this is really just to try and get people thinking about this. And Kelly, I appreciate, the opportunity to share this with the leadership in York on what's going on. So I guess now's the time to say, are there any questions or concerns out there? It's been kind of a quiet audience. I know it's Monday morning.
Like, we understand that, like all processes, this isn't all, unicorns and rainbows, and everything's going to be great.
Ponies and unicorns?
Unicorns. I have a 3-year-old girl, so unicorns are part of my life. But truly share the things that worry you about it, concern you about it, things that you like about it. We really do just want to hear those pieces of it. We're not, housing problem solving, I want to be really clear, is not required. So this is not the coalition saying, we have to do this because HUD says we have to, and if we don't do it, we're not going to have money coming in. This is not that conversation. This is literally just an opportunity to help the community. So if there's not a lot of interest in this, or if it feels too intensive, if there are things that are concerns, we have an opportunity to look at those and see if we can do something with those concerns to make it a little bit more feasible.
Right.
I think it's an important conversation to have within our own departments. I know for me, I have a new case manager, and I have 3 brand new staff, 1 last week and 2 this week. So it's reacclimating people to more than just what a regular intake looks like, but really how to get in there and problem solve and help people to make the best decisions for their life. So, and it really, it takes some training, not just a conversation with your staff, to really get them to fully understand how to do that, and how to maximize the resources and information they have, and understand that sometimes there's just really no boundaries. You can go as far as, you know, meeting with a family member, bringing in outside individuals, those support networks, and helping to make the best decisions that will work best for that particular client. So it there's a lot involved, and it's more intense, and we don't already feel overwhelmed. You're adding more to the piece, but in the long term, if we can process through individuals this way, I can really see it as a major plus in how many people you're having to serve and how long you're keeping folks in the shelter setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Marcella, I agree with you about the training. I definitely think it takes some skill to be able to interview like this and get the information out. Just, you know, I work in the next door office, and so oftentimes we have people who come in, and of course we do ask them who else they can stay with, who else they have. And it's just so, they, you know, of course people are like, no, I have nowhere else to stay. That's why I'm here. And I do think like probably maybe there is some pushing or continued, I don't know if push is the right word, but just
Exploring.
processing with them on their options. I also, the one thought I had initially with this whole process is I think we spend so much time doing case management with people once they're referred into the housing, the referral system, and we don't do enough of it on the front end. So just from what I've seen in our office, if we have people who come in and say they say like, in 2-3 months I'm going to be evicted, I can't keep going, this is not how it's happening, they're not a priority for case management as the person who is standing in front of us who says, I have nowhere to stay today. Does that make sense to the group?
Absolutely.
Sure,
And,
absolutely.
and that's always been something that's bothered people within the Bell system. And it's like, so I guess with this approach, I see like if you had more people on that front end who could do initial case management,
That's a major plus.
to prevent, but I feel like we put too much emphasis on the back end. Like right now I have 13 staff at next door. I think if I do the math, I think it's 10. Oh, it's probably 8 or 9 case managers, but only one is an intake case manager. So maybe there is a little bit of a difference there with changing even how we see things and how we do things.
Yeah.
So as far as the
Absolutely.
training goes, I mean, you're completely right about the training. There are a couple of things that are always recommended when you're having rapid resolution or housing problem solving conversations. And they're things that we all hear floating around, but I think that offering them to frontline staff is really key, and making sure that frontline staff have an opportunity to attend it, because we all know how hard it is for frontline staff who are seeing people to take the time to do those things. So I will acknowledge the time problem right off the bat, but trauma-informed care training, more than just a basic 101, is really important to this conversation. But so is, Lori said about pushing, so is motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing, that's your term.
Yeah, there you go.
I also call it exploring the option.
Yeah.
Kelly, it's funny. I heard the same thing in my head right away.
Yeah, me too. So those are important too, because motivational interviewing is, you know, not just saying, do you have anyone you can stay with? It's framing the question differently so that the person doesn't feel like, don't you think I already thought about this? You know, when you're asking that question. So it's things like, where have you been staying? Oh, you were with your aunt. What happened? Like, drawing it out through multiple questions that feel less confrontational is part of the motivational interviewing process. And also pointing out all of the strengths in someone's situation. So they're like, I just got a job and I was staying with my aunt, but she and I are fighting and I can't stay. And it's like, well, first of all, let me just say congratulations on your new job. That's fantastic. And, you know, just pulling those types of things in. So absolutely training. Those would be things we would look to try to provide to your frontline staff to help them.
I don't think you can. I think the training process really, it goes on. It's not just initial.
Right.
not just an 8-hour training, you know,
Right.
just from, I have staff who've been here a long time and say, Marcella, I'm not sure how to handle this situation, da, 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 da. Well, tell me and talk to me about the situation. And I said, okay, so what do you think how do you think you should respond to that? Well, and how do you think you should respond to that? And then it's getting them to critical thinking. And then they actually know how to do it. They just had to process that through. So it takes a lot of that too, to get people to do what's most effective.
We
Oh,
all
and
like it take the time to problem solve all those things when we feel overwhelmed. So that is part of it from a case manager perspective too. That is absolutely part of it.
Yeah, and I think another thing that people will become more accustomed to with being further trained is focusing again, like Kelly said, on those strengths. Well, have you ever had a situation like that before? Or have you been in this situation before? Have you had clients like this before for staff? What did you do in that sense in at that time that worked or that didn't work? Let's try to pull something together. And
Yeah,
it's
and I-
going back to that. You may have been here before, but you got yourself out. So let's see how we might be able to do that again.
Yeah, and I think Marcella, back to what you're saying, you know, one of the things that I've seen through the years is that trauma-informed care is almost as much about dealing with the trauma of the case manager as it is with the trauma of the person we're serving, because some of the things, I mean, let's just face it, there's nothing more emotionally draining than spending an hour with somebody going through some of the things we hear. And
Yeah.
And I think that is why this is such a benefit also, because we're helping train our frontline providers with a way to kind of slow the conversation down, and maybe not slow, but change how the conversation evolves so that it's not so much you're on fire and my job is to put that fire out right now. It's more of let's hear what's really going on. And I do feel there's real benefits to training. Honestly, every time I've sat in one of these trainings, I've learned something new.
Yeah.
So I feel there is some real benefits to having that.
And sometimes the stress is sometimes teaching or motivating a case manager how to manage that stress. I had a case manager who literally told 4 different people, now they were upper management people, but vented to one supervisor, to another supervisor, to me, to someone else about a situation they were dealing with the client. And I'm like, oh, you're stressing this whole thing. Don't do that. I said, document it first. Come to me, let's talk about it, and let's problem solve it. You're doing way too much, you're putting too much energy into it, you're taking on too much stress. And you know, when we finally talked about it and she realized what the solutions were that actually worked in the situation, I'm like, look how much time you put into just fretting the whole thing. And sometimes going to somebody you know who can help you process, there's no right or wrong or dumb question when it comes to helping to solve a situation on a person's life. No matter how minute or how big or how frustrated you get, bounce it off with somebody who can help you to process and work effectively right away.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point. You know, with case managers and with potential clients, the biggest thing I think at the very beginning is, okay, let's slow down. You know, I was having this initial conversation with a gentleman the other day, and he was, you know, here's this problem. Before we even get 3 sentences into what the issue is and how we can work on it, he jumps to this one and then jumps to this one. And so it was a case if I had to say, okay, let's slow down, because we're not going to, there's no way I can get the full information from you when your mind is very stressed out. And I get that you're stressed out. I can hear it in your voice. I can hear it from your words. Let's look at one stumbling block. I usually call it that. Let's look at one stumbling block at a time. And I'll list them out and we'll see what we can deal with first. And, you know, at first it was like, well, I'm sorry, I'm very anxious. I said, I get that. I absolutely get it. But if we slow down a little bit, that'll also help your anxiety. So let's take it a little slower. I have as much time as you need. And that's also a big one, is just saying, however long this conversation takes, I'm here. Now, that might not always be the case. So you might have to say, you know what, we'll start talking now. We'll see where we get. And then looking at that calendar right away. Okay, and making it a priority for later that day or the next day. We'll talk again so that it is quick.
So,
not always easy right now during COVID when you have 18 million things going on.
yeah, exactly. And
But, you know, I've had to talk to staff of, let's prioritize, you know, if it's, you know, you needed to call such and such, can that move to tomorrow, or is that pressing immediately that day? If it can move to tomorrow, let's do that so we free up time with this client.
Yeah. And so with, you know, good segue there for kind of wrapping this up, because we're at about an hour and a half here. So Kelly, is there any other particulars you feel we need to kind of address with this meeting? I'm thinking, you know, Laura, I'm sure you would help. I'd be happy to, down the road, if it's appropriate, to do some training with Frontline and have some different kinds of discussions and about the value of HPS and RR. And so, you know, if I'm just putting it out there, if someone is interested, Kelly, if you feel there's a need, I'm happy to help out. You know, putting something together either in a Zoom or, you know, maybe after COVID slows down a little, whatever makes the most sense for this audience, because there is a lot going on now. But I'm just putting that out there. And I guess everybody has my email and Laura's. Please feel free if you need any literature or want to email me and ask any additional questions or have a side conversation about this. I'd be happy to talk about it some more. And I don't know, Laura, you have any last thoughts there? Kelly, Laura, anybody?
The only thing I would say is, you know, if we are able to do a more in-depth training with you guys so that you have a sense of, you know, what the process really is and your frontline staff, we would love to do that. And that would also include practicing these conversations. It wouldn't just be like this introduction, here's why it's important. We'll take it that next step with you guys so that it becomes a little bit more natural. It becomes a little more, the ability becomes a little more in-depth right up front. Because again, we all do this, but we may do it at different lines down the process. Now we can work to put it together as much as possible at the front end. And we'll definitely work on practicing all of that with you.
Yeah, I agree with everything you both said. We are going to send the slides out and get you the information from this call, especially for those maybe that couldn't join us today. I will circle back shortly, give you a little bit of time to process, see if there's anything else that's come up that is a concern or something you want to address. And also at that point, ask you kind of how your specific organization works and what our best strategy might be for training your staff and what that looks like. Is it multiple sessions, short snippets? Would you rather us just provide large trainings and just get it out of the way? Those kinds of things. So I'm not asking for a response to that right now, but we want to make sure that as we provide additional trainings, whether they're with Bill and Laura about the conversation, whether they are things like motivational interviewing, those kinds of things, we want to make sure that they fit the structure of what your staff are already dealing with. So I know, for example, that I can't take every single case manager out of Bell Family Shelter for an 8-hour session. So I know that's not possible. So think about the best way to train your staff, and then I'm going to reach out. I'll give you a little time to process, and then I'll reach out and ask you those questions. I think that think about your time frames too. You know, we will accommodate the time frame that fits you best. I know there's a lot of concern in the community right now. Bill alluded to COVID. I think we're all kind of waiting for the cold, flu, COVID trifecta to hit this fall and winter. Still comfortable going forward if we want to do it now. If it's something that you just feel overwhelmed, we can look at the spring. So this is really supposed to help you guys. So think about those questions, and then when I reach out, I'll give it a week or two. When I reach out, let me know your thoughts on those things, and then we will schedule what best fits you need.
Thanks, Kelly.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
All right.
Again, I
Your time,
apologize,
everybody.
guys.
That's
I
okay.
apologize for being late. I clicked on some random Zoom meeting and I'm like, why isn't anybody here?
Well, I was sitting here emailing her on my phone, so.
All you have to do is type in the wrong number and you could be sitting in somebody's queue for a long time.
That's what happened.
One little number. That's all it takes. That's right.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate
Oh,
you.
thank you all.
Thank you for
Thanks,
your
Bill.
time.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks,
Thank
Kelly.
you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I was saving the chat because Amy sent something like all of a sudden.
Yeah, I just saw that. You're saving it?
Yeah, I got it. All right, I'm good.